A mother in Florida did everything right. Her daughter was born with a severe disability. Years of caregiving, years of fighting, and finally, after a medical malpractice lawsuit, a settlement large enough to fund her daughter's care for the rest of her life. So she did what every advisor tells you to do. She placed that money into a special needs trust, run by one of the largest, most established nonprofit trust administrators in the country. 24 years in business, over 2,000 active clients, a mission statement built around compassion and service. Then, on February 9, 2024, that organization filed for bankruptcy. And buried inside the filing was a number that should worry anyone who's ever trusted someone else to manage their money. More than $100 million, missing, from over 1,500 accounts just like hers. The money that was supposed to last a lifetime was gone. And she wasn't the only one. Here's what should bother you about this story, even if you've never heard of a special needs trust. The family did nothing wrong. They picked a reputable-looking organization. They followed the process exactly as they were told to, and it still happened. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If trust and reputation weren't enough to protect them, what's actually protecting you if you ever hand control of your money to someone else? That's what I want to walk you through today. What happened? How it was allowed to go on for over a decade, and, more importantly, the specific, structural things you can put in place so it never happens to you or your family. So, grab a notepad and let's get into it. Let me begin by explaining to you what actually happened. The organization was called the Center for Special Needs Trust Administration, CSNT, founded around 2000 by a man named Leo Gavoni in Pinellas County, Florida. It ran what's called a pooled special needs trust. A common setup because if someone with a disability holds settlement or inheritance money directly, they can lose access to Medicaid and supplemental security income, which cap how much money a beneficiary is allowed to hold. So, a nonprofit administrator holds and manages the money instead, making distributions for things like medical equipment, therapy, and housing. By early 2024, CSNT was managing more than 2,100 of these trusts, holding roughly $200 million. Many of the beneficiaries were children with severe cerebral palsy, or people whose settlement was their only financial lifeline for the rest of their lives. When the bankruptcy hit, court filings showed what had allegedly been happening since at least 2009. Gavoni had been quietly moving beneficiaries' money into a company he personally controlled, disguising the transfers internally as loans. No independent oversight, no real underwriting, just money moving out of vulnerable people's trust accounts and into his own. Over 15 years, that money reportedly funded private jet travel, a craft brewery, real estate, and personal debts, while clients kept receiving account statements showing balances that no longer existed. In June 2025, a federal grand jury charged Gavoni and his accountant with conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud and money laundering. He's been held without bail. Courts have already found him civilly liable for more than $120 million. Some estimates put the real number closer to $150 million with interest. The government seized over 100 of his properties and businesses, including that brewery, which sold at auction for $5.5 million. Against $100 million in missing funds, that recovers almost nothing. One family has publicly said delays in accessing trust funds during a medical crisis contributed to a loved one's death. This isn't an abstract number on a spreadsheet. It's real families losing real support they were counting on. Now here's the part that you might not read in the front news headline, and it's the part that actually matters for you. This wasn't just a case of one dishonest man. It was a case where the system itself made it easy to steal for 15 years without anyone catching it. CSNT was a registered nonprofit, and nonprofit status carries a kind of built-in trust, mission-driven, not profit-motivated. But legally, nonprofit status is just a tax classification. It has nothing to do with financial oversight. A bank trust department has to hold minimum reserves, gets unannounced examinations from banking regulators, and has to keep client money legally separate from its own. A nonprofit trust administrator like CSNT isn't a bank, so none of that applies. It files one broad summary form with the IRS each year that can't detect insider loans. Beyond that, oversight falls to state probate court, which typically only investigates if someone specifically petitions it to. In Florida, and in most states, there's no requirement that a special needs trust report to a judge every year unless a court orders it. which means CSNT was managing $200 million with essentially no mandatory ongoing outside oversight of its transactions. And Gavoni used that gap on purpose. He controlled the trust administrator. He controlled the company keeping the financial records. He controlled the company receiving the money. Every layer of the system that should have checked his behavior, he owned. When one person controls the money, the records, and the reporting, there's no actual oversight left, just that person's honesty. And when that runs out, nobody finds out until the money's already gone. Now, you might be thinking, I don't have a special needs trust. This doesn't apply to me. But the vulnerability underneath this story is bigger than one type of account. It's what happens anytime you hand another person or organization control over your money, which, for most retirees, eventually happens in one form or the other. The most common version is a power of attorney. Most retirement plans involve naming someone, a spouse, an adult child, a trusted friend, with durable power of attorney to manage your finances if you become incapacitated. It's one of the most powerful legal documents that exists. It lets that person conduct almost any financial transaction in your name. And unlike a bank account or a trust, there's no routine, ongoing check on how that authority gets used. Financial exploitation by a family member holding power of attorney is actually the single most common form of elder financial abuse in the U.S., and it happens in families nobody would suspect. There are a few other versions of this same risk. If cognitive decline ever makes it hard for you to manage your own Social Security, the SSA can appoint a representative payee to receive and manage those benefits. And while oversight improved after Congress strengthened the rules in 2018, the SSA's own Inspector General has repeatedly found the required annual accounting isn't consistently enforced. If incapacity gets severe enough, a court can appoint a guardian or conservator, better structured, but most probate courts don't have the resources to really audit those accountings either. And a dishonest financial advisor, especially one who's built years of personal trust with you, can move money or misrepresent balances the same way, particularly if nobody's checking statements closely. Different situations, same underlying gap. Someone else has control, and no one outside that relationship is required to verify what's actually happening. So what should actually make you pay attention? A few signs showed up in the CSNT case that apply just as easily to any situation where someone else manages your money. Number 1, smooth, suspiciously consistent returns that don't move with the market. That's not good management. That's often a sign the numbers are made up. CSNT's clients were shown statements with returns that had nothing to do with reality. Number 2, a trustee or manager who gets defensive when you ask questions. A legitimate fiduciary welcomes scrutiny. Multiple CSNT families later said their concerns were brushed aside instead of answered with documentation. Number 3, one person or entity controlling every layer, the money, the records, and the reporting, with no independent party able to verify anything. That's exactly the setup Gavoni built. Number 4, unusual delays getting distributions processed. When CSNT's finances were quietly falling apart from the theft, families noticed requests taking longer than they should. In hindsight, that delay was the warning. Number 5, no independent audit. A trustworthy administrator managing serious money should be able to produce a recent audit from a CPA firm with no financial ties to them on request. If that doesn't exist, or they're reluctant to share it, take that seriously. Now here's what actually protects you, not vague reassurance, specific structural things. First, and most important, custodial separation. The person or organization managing your money should never be the same one physically holding it. Your cash and investments should sit with an independent, federally regulated custodian, a major bank or brokerage, with your administrator having authority to direct transactions, but never direct access to move money themselves. CSNT had zero separation. Gavoni's organization both held and managed the assets, so he could move money with a simple internal transfer. Separation doesn't stop a dishonest person from trying. It forces the theft through an outside institution with its own compliance checks, which makes it dramatically harder to pull off and far easier to catch. Second, name an independent watchdog in a trust. That's often called a trust protector. Someone with no financial or family tie to the trustee, who has explicit authority to demand records, review any transaction with a related company, and remove the trustee without a lengthy court fight. Third, require an independent audit every year, done by a CPA with no financial relationship to the administrator, delivered directly to you or your family, not a summary the administrator writes themselves. If anyone resists putting that in writing, that resistance tells you something. Fourth, for your own planning, get your durable power of attorney, living trust, and trusted contact designation in place now, while you're fully able to choose thoughtfully who you trust, not during a crisis. Name someone to independently review activity, set up account alerts for large transactions, and actually talk to your family in advance about who would step in and manage things if you ever needed help. That conversation, had early, is worth more than any document written after the fact. And before you place money with any trust administrator or manager, search their name in court records for pending litigation. Ask directly whether your assets are held by an independent custodian, whether they carry fiduciary liability insurance, and who audits their books. A simple search would have surfaced warning signs about CSNT years before it collapsed. If you ever suspect something's wrong, for a Social Security representative payee issue, contact the SSA's Inspector General at 1-800-2690-271 or online at oig.ssa.gov. For exploitation by a family member or caregiver, contact your state's Adult Protective Services. For anything involving a trust, talk to an elder law attorney before you confront anyone or move any money. The National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys at naela.org can help you find one. And for direct fraud attempts, imposter calls, phishing, wire transfer demands, report to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov and to the DOJ's National Elder Fraud Hotline at 1-8333-728-311. More than 1,500 families found out in a single month that the money they'd trusted someone to protect for a lifetime simply wasn't there anymore. Gavoni personally reassured people their money was safe. His organization had been running for almost 25 years, with a mission statement and a spotless-looking reputation. None of that meant the money was actually there. The lesson here isn't really about one fraudster in Florida. It's the same one professional investors have relied on for decades. Trust isn't a control, warmth isn't a safeguard, and how long an organization has been around is not a guarantee. What actually protects your money is separation, independent oversight, and a documented way to catch problems early, before they become catastrophic. You now know what those protections look like. If this changed how you think about your own finances or a loved one's, let me know in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, consider subscribing. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.